C'è una domanda lì?
Sì, allora Roberto Di Frigio, Proiezioni Mentali. Una scena molto forte che ho veramente apprezzato anche il film è stata quando vediamo per la prima volta Holder che indossa la divisa da nazista. Quindi quello che volevo chiedere era, anche lei nella costruzione del personaggio, come è stato in quel momento mettersi quella divisa addosso e immaginarsi tutto quello che rappresentava, insomma, che ha rappresentato?
Vestimenti della SS? Yeah, he was asking about, what do you got? Yeah. It was interesting because I did a play one time, many years ago, where I had to wear a uniform that was similar, right, called Bent, by Martin Sherman. And I played an SS camp administrator, military person. And I don't remember it. I was just trying to get it right and make sure everything looked right in that play. But for some reason, and Miriam can attest to this, the first time I tried on the uniform, we were standing in Budapest, it was a very warm summer day, and I think the first time I wore it was when I was running around in Morris's apartment looking for him on Kristallnacht. And I was kind of, well, the first time was actually at the wardrobe fitting, and I was quite grumpy about it. I don't know why. I realized later that I thought, well, I'm just tired. I tried on all the clothes and just before shooting. And then when I put this uniform on, the hat doesn't, everything felt wrong. And I thought about it the next day, and there wasn't anything really wrong with the clothes. They fit as they should. I just didn't like them very much. It doesn't make me a good or bad person. I'm just saying it was an interesting reaction that I had to it, and I'm sure it has to do with what information I have, what prejudices I have about Germans of the period, which is understandable, what's been handed down to me by not only my family, particularly the Danish side of the family, having been occupied, including my father and all his siblings and everything, by the Germans, but the information that we all have, mostly from movies and from books, about that period. I realized that one of the things I realized in preparing the role for this movie, when I was traveling around Germany, I went and spent a lot of time, as much as I could, driving around, and I went to listen to Mahler, which is featured in this movie, in Berlin, in Munich, and then I went to Poland and listened to Mahler in Warsaw. I was lucky that the pieces, many of the ones that you hear in the movie, were being performed in Berlin, in Munich, in Warsaw, and other places. And when I was in Germany, I realized something, now that I'm thinking, even though it's done in English, I am playing a German. And so I'm suddenly having to be a German in a fair way, like with any character, without judging the character. I want to be this character. I don't want to make a comment on it. And I think that's one of the strengths of this movie, that unlike almost all movies about this period, whether they're made by Germans, English, Americans, or Italians, or anyone else, is that it's not told with the benefit of hindsight. It's not told, saying, well, these are the camps, and look what the Germans did, and, of course, they're crazy, and look what they did. They're prone to this sort of thing. They're robotic, they're prone to follow all these prejudices that one can easily have about that period and about Germans from that period. It's a movie told as much as possible now, as the play was, even though the play is more theatrical, sort of conceptual, but it's basically the same idea, that this is one man, a family man, and his friends, and other people. It's not a movie about Hitler or about Goering or about, even though you see people like Eichmann and so forth and Goebbels briefly, it's not about them. It's not about the culmination of all the events. It's about people dealing day to day, as people do in Italy or anywhere else. And I think that's what makes this movie, when Miriam was referring to September 11th and other things, I felt that in making the movie and in watching the movie, that you immediately make the leap from what would I have done if I was Halder, And then you jump immediately to, well, what am I doing now? Because after all, what he does is what we do. You make little decisions every day about what you're going to cook for dinner and whether you're going to say yes or no to your wife about helping the kids with the homework and, you know, and am I going to accept this or that compromise at the university, at work, wherever. Just in life, and I think in any society, you call it Italy, or you call it Germany, or you call it England. It's an idea. It's not real. Just because there's passports and flags, it's not real. It's a concept. It's a process. Just like marriage is an idea. It's a process. It's something that you work at. And the way it, you know, any country, any geographical area is full of people making little decisions and big decisions all the time. And this group of millions of decisions on a daily basis is what makes a country be what we think it is at any given time, you know. So all these things were really interesting and were allowed to be even more interesting and pertinent because it wasn't a movie that's politically correct or incorrect. I think in some way the strength of what Lisa and Telmarine did and, you know, what C.B. Taylor had done was that it's not necessarily nobody's sitting in judgment. You may not like it, you know, at the end in some way. And it's interesting, there have been people who were anxious to talk about the movie, say, when we showed it in Toronto Film Festival, and they would say, well, you know, I liked it, and then at the end I wasn't so happy about it. I said, well, what were you happy about? I said, well, then he goes and does this, and come on, you know. And what I felt was that they were identifying initially with this man, going, well, yeah, I can see making this decision and that compromise, and then at the end, well, he puts this uniform on. Come on. No, I wouldn't do that. In other words, people don't want to identify, they want to remove themselves from something they've identified with. And I felt that it wasn't that they were saying they didn't like the movie, they just didn't like how they felt about themselves indirectly, you know. And I think that's interesting. That to me means that it worked on some level, that you're not comfortable with having identified with this person initially. You know, I may be wrong, I don't know how you guys feel.
Una domanda lì?
Una domanda per il signor Mortensen. Uno appunto dei temi del film è l'eutanasia. Si parte con un romanzo del protagonista che per fiction racconta questa compassione per chi soffre, però questo poi viene usato per portare all'estremo sull'eugenetica, il progetto nazista. Lui personalmente, siccome è uno dei grandi dibattiti oggi, immagino non solo nel nostro paese, che posizione ha su questo tema?
Euthanasia? I do think that, you know, that's a big bone of contention right now, recently in England, I know, in the press, because this young man who went to, where did he go? Switzerland, a rugby player who was injured, you know, paralyzed, and he decided he wanted to. It's a tricky question. It's not an easy thing to answer, but in principle, I think that people should have the right to decide about those things, and that families should have the right to decide. I do think, whatever anyone decides, I do think it's smart for everybody to write down on paper or dictate, if they can't write, their feelings on the matter when they're young. You know, nobody wants to think about death, but you know, it's going to happen. Illness will happen if you live long enough, to everyone, to all of us. And it's worthwhile saying, you know, if I were to get in a car accident, if I get to a point where I can't function, if you feel that way and you don't want to, in certain circumstances, continue to be kept alive in an artificial manner, that you should have the right to write down, you know, sort of a will to saying, this is what I want. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to continue if I can't continue in the way I would like to. I think everybody should have a right to do that. There was something I was going to say about that. Well, anyway, I'll think of it.
America, una rivista bilingue spagnolo-italiano che si pubblica in Italia. La mia domanda è per il signor Mortensen, che io credo, se non sbaglio, ha vissuto per un periodo in Argentina. Vorrei comprendere da lei, capire un po' meglio il messaggio, se c'è un messaggio di questo film. Se uno lo guarda potrebbe pensare che è indirizzato a mostrare al mondo che in realtà veramente in Germania ci sono state delle persone che non sapevano quello che succedeva. Lo domando perché anche nel mio paese durante la dittatura militare ci sono state